Okay. Hello, welcome everyone to the Increasing Research Visibility and Impact webinar sponsored by the Academy of Marketing Science. I'm Hyunju Shin, the Director of Online Seminar for AMS and an Associate Professor of Marketing at Georgia Southern University in US. I'm your host and moderator for today's panel. I'll be monitoring the Q&A box for questions that you have for our panel today. Questions will be answered after all the panelists are done. We'll record this event and make the recordings available by posting it on our AMS YouTube channel, hopefully by tomorrow. Today's webinar covers an important topic of increasing the visibility and impact of our research work to increase citations, brand ourselves in the area of expertise, and enhance contributions above and beyond academic silos. We have expert panels joining from 3 different continents who will share their collective insights and experiences. All of them are also very active members of AMS. For the agenda, Cleopatra will begin with discussing research branding, followed by Vicky, who will delve further into how to fine-tune research promotion based on the target market. Then we'll discuss how to engage with the media. And lastly, Nick will share his insight as a publisher on how to prepare manuscript and manage them following publications. Each panelist will introduce themselves first and then share their experience. Our first panelist is Cleopatra.
Hello. My name is Cleopatra Veloutsu, and I'm a professor of brand management at the University of Glasgow. Although my name and my accent reveals very clearly that I'm not Scottish. I am Greek, but I've been working in Glasgow since '99, so I suppose that I'm partly Scottish now. Clearly, my research and my title is in brand management, so I couldn't do anything else when I was asked to work and produce something on how to actually develop your visibility of your work by thinking about my discipline. And when we are trying to send information about our research work and make us known as researchers, what we practically do is branding ourselves as academic researchers. As in any branding exercise, in order to do things well, first thing you need to do is to position your research. In other words, to know what you are doing and be consistent. And the second thing to do is signal your research. In other words, communicate what you have done to others. Can you change the slide, please? When we are talking about positioning your research, we are talking about 2 separate aspects: the choices and the projects. The choices is your research identity. You need to sit down and think very clearly what you want to be known for. A problem that I see quite a lot in many colleagues is that they don't know what they stand for. Whenever they see a project, they just jump on it without thinking what they want to be known for. I'm going to use some famous examples of people that are not here. Joe Hare. Do we all know him? I suppose we do. What is he famous for? Because of his work in marketing communications? I don't think so. Because of his work in distribution management? I don't think so. He is known for his research in a specific area of methodology, quantitative methodology. So he decided very clearly that's what the position he wants to have, and he started working in this positioning to build a name for himself. Tom Scott's the same. He was known, he's on the other side, and he was very close, somebody I liked a lot. He was known for marketing communications, integrated marketing communications. In order to increase your visibility and get known, you need to realize that you need to choose what you want to be known for and communicate it. Communicate it through ORCID, Google Scholar, social media, think whether you have time or not to engage with academic social media. I don't engage with academic social media, other people do, but make sure that you know what you are, write it in your resume, and then make the research projects related to this specific aspect. Even if people approach you to work on different areas that sound interesting, try not to engage with these projects, because in other words, you're going to end up stuck in the middle. We are all teaching a little bit of strategy. You want to have a clear positioning and consider working with people and in projects that are in this particular area. So to develop slowly your portfolio and communicate this portfolio to others. Now, be very careful. Quality is important. People that start, especially young academics, think that in 6 months, they can have 200 publications, that they will end up in all the top journals. If you can manage, please teach me how you do it. I admire you. I never managed. I started my academic career with my first publication in 97, and I still have 57, 58 publishing, far more than most people I know of, 3 to 4 papers a year. Other people might do more. So research choices, research projects. When you have all of that, can you change the slide, please? It's about time to start communicating to others and publicizing your choices and make sure that others learn what you do. Now, publicizing is different than publishing. Publicizing means that you make your work known, whether this is going to be through a real publication or through a conference or through presentations in seminar series or through something else. It's a different issue. Quite a lot of people in the PhD program might not publish all their work in journals, but they might have the opportunity to present some of this work. Remember, you are trying to keep communicating that you are active in this particular area to different audiences. So you need to communicate as you are working, and you need to communicate after the completion of the project or the publication. Go to social media, go to people that you have cited extensively, go to people that will see this paper and they will say, wow, I need to read that. What I typically say to people that want to write something is that before they submit it, they need to think, what are the 5 readers, 5 academic readers that would be delighted to read this thing, and they will be excited either because it builds on their work, or it contradicts their work, or it adds to the knowledge. Try and communicate with these people saying that this is some new insights, you might be interested, without though pushing them. So present your papers later on, go to social media, say that this was published, and try not to say, oh, I am wonderful. Look how good I am. I published 3 more papers. Make it more personal. Go and say, listen, this is a new piece of work that is on that, and it might be of interest. Or, wow, I'm excited. This is the news I have, and I am happy. If you want to read it, it's fine. If you don't, again, be happy for my happiness. This is what my advice is. I only had 8 minutes, and I promised to Vicky that I will not use any of the time. So I hope, Vicky, you won't kill me for getting more time from you. Thank you very much for listening. The floor is to the other speakers, and I love you all. Thank you for being here for us.
Thank you, Cleopatra. That was a wonderful segue into to what I want to share with everyone. And let me just first start by giving a brief introduction of myself. I am a professor of marketing and a Babson Research Scholar at Babson College in the USA. I am past president of the Academy of Marketing Science, and I guess my important claim to fame right now is that I am the editor of the Journal of Marketing Education. And so what I thought I would talk with everyone about today is picking up on Cleopatra's comments about promoting your work. I thought I would use what I've been doing with the Journal of Marketing Education and with what I think of as intertwining our personal brand with our research. And I think that is critical. When we are promoting our research, we can do that in multiple ways, but I think it's critical to have a strategy behind that and to realize that it is your personal brand that's something that needs to travel with you no matter where you are. Many of you won't stay at the same university for your entire career, and you want that brand to travel with you, but you also want that brand to be tied to something, if you will. And in my case right now, I try to tie that brand to the journal. So I think it's important for all of us to think strategically about our research, as Cleopatra was talking about. And from my perspective, I think about this from a social media perspective, thinking about who my followers are. I have a wide range of followers, but I think of them for myself strategically. I think about academic colleagues around the world. I think about business acquaintances, and I think about former students. And I'll come back to that former students part in an example in a minute. So when I'm thinking about academic colleagues around the world and my business acquaintances, I really, from an academic perspective, I think about the Journal of Marketing Education. One of my, something I take very seriously is my role as editor, and I want to build the presence of the journal amongst my academic colleagues. That's the way I build my brand and the journal's brand. And so when you think about that, on the Journal of Marketing Education website, for example, I can open a particular article that has been published or that is on Online First, and we have a link to share that. So I try to each week share one of the articles out of the Journal of Marketing Education. So by doing that, I'm promoting the journal, but I'm also promoting the authors for whom I'm pushing out their work at that particular time. And I see that as a key job for me, as a key role as an editor, to promote the work of the educators who are publishing in the journal. So I try to do that. So in essence, I'm not giving a shout out to myself, I'm giving a shout out to my authors and to the journal. To the academic colleagues around the world and to business acquaintances, I try to promote books. So a couple of years ago, I had a go-to-market strategy for women entrepreneurs that had work from around 28 different scholars from around the world. I would try to promote different chapters of that book regularly from a women entrepreneur standpoint. I had a recent book come out, and there were 7 authors. Each week, I'm trying to promote content from each of those 7 authors. So keep in mind, we're marketers. This is promoting me, it's promoting the book, and it's promoting the authors of that book. And so academic colleagues and business acquaintances, where Cleopatra mentioned what I call the topic where you're hanging your hat right now. Currently, my hat is being hung on direct selling and women entrepreneurs, and I try to ensure consistency across promotion of those particular topics. And then I have another group of followers, which I refer to as former students. And this is something where I think of my LinkedIn promotion. being in terms of accolades. And so I try to pick up on my former students who are doing really well in their professions. I try to pick up on my educator colleagues who are doing really well. So I have followers and I have topics that are constantly going through my mind when I'm thinking about promoting research. If you would click to the next slide, please. And so I want you to think about these the way I do, which are conscious activities. So if you think of LinkedIn as an example, I say all actions should be conscious actions to my market. And so I have to know that every like, every comment, every share, every post, I try to ensure is following through on my strategy as far as what I'm trying to deliver. And so just as an example, what I personally do not message is probably a great way to think about this. I personally try to shy away from personal direct promotion. I will do it if you think about my activities, let's say through accolades, but I try to frame it, not that Vicki has done this, but within the context of where the award came from, I try to build that in. And so I'm not doing direct promotion of me, but I would hope as a marketer, it's coming through that I am building my own brand. I rarely do what I call public service, post, shares, comments, or likes. Public service is because I'm talking about LinkedIn, it's very rare for me to do that. I do not post individual student graduation. I see that a lot. And it's interesting if you start thinking about these conscious activities strategically, I right away know people whom I'm connected to on LinkedIn. And I know that if that person's name pops up on my feed, he is probably promoting an individual student. And that's great, but that's just not my strategy for my research branding. I do not challenge others on my LinkedIn comments. I just don't feel like that's something that I don't want that associated with my brand. If I'm a peer review on a paper, sure, I'll challenge, but that's the double-blind review process. I don't message political because I don't want that intertwined with my research branding, and I don't message as related to religious content. And again, I try to do that because I want that clear line of demarcation on what I'm doing to promote the journal, to promote me, if you will, and to promote the research activities that we're all engaged in. So I will say that even my likes and my comments, I am very careful with those. So I have an interest, let's say, in direct selling, which crosses over into sales. And so you will see my activity on things related to sales centers because we publish about sales in the Journal of Marketing Ed. And like this morning, I just shared a post that Drew Graywall had, received accolades for something. That is something that, to me, is accolades of one of my colleagues around the world. So I guess to wrap this up, I would just say that you should have a strategy on your social media. You should know who your followers are, whom you want to target with your particular topics, and you should engage in conscious activities, things that you will do and things that you won't do. So that's a brief summary, and I will turn it over, I think, to Dan.
Well, thank you, Vicki. And welcome to everyone from Wellington, New Zealand, the capital of the country. I'm an associate professor of marketing, and I've been in academia for almost 20 years, half of it in New Zealand and the other half in the US. I was an associate professor at Yeshiva University in New York City, and before that, I was an assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati. What I'm going to talk about today is engaging with the news media and a little bit of a different perspective from what many of you are used to. I think many people, after they publish an article, are very familiar with dealing with the communications department at their universities. And the departments try to help in publicizing the research and releasing press releases to the news media with the hope that they'll cover, your research. Now, what I'm going to talk about is my experience with being a little bit more proactive and really approaching the news media directly. And I'll talk about it through the lens of my experience in the US with the Wall Street Journal, and then afterwards as a columnist for major newspapers in New Zealand. So with regards to the Wall Street Journal, a couple of years ago, there was a new column that they started called Crisis of the Week. And my area of research relates to crisis management. And I sent an email to the reporter and I volunteered to be on their panel of experts. And he wrote back to me and he said that they have major public relations firms and executives from those firms that are on the panel, but he's willing to give it a shot and have me on the panel. And really the objective was two. One, I thought it was important to have a say in issues relating to my area of expertise. And the second issue, which is related to this webinar, I thought it would be a way to get my research in the Wall Street Journal, that if I was writing for them, when I published an article, I'd be able to approach them directly and pitch my research. And that turned out to be very effective. I published an article in Business Horizons on crisis contagion, and I contacted the reporter and I pitched it to him. He took it to the editor and they interviewed me and they published the interview. And the Wall Street Journal was very happy. In the section on risk and compliance, it was the most read article of the week. And it also generated a lot of positive things outside of the newspaper. So the slide that you see here is an example of that. The Embassy of the Netherlands in New Zealand highlighted it as a successful research collaboration between New Zealand and the Netherlands. My co-author, Yijing Wang, is from Erasmus University. So that turned out to be really very successful. And I was on that panel of experts for the Wall Street Journal for a couple of years. Now I'm going to shift to what I've been doing in New Zealand for the past 2 years. If you can switch to the next slide. So I always like to take things to the next level. And with regards to the Wall Street Journal, I was on a panel of experts and I really wanted to write my own column on crisis management. And what's the advantage of writing your own column? You don't have a filter. It's your voice. You don't have the media that's reporting on what they want to write about with regards to your research. And so I pitched this idea of a column on crisis management to the major media outlets in New Zealand. And they had never done it before. But I was really lucky in that the largest newspaper in New Zealand, the New Zealand Herald, hired me as a monthly columnist. And here in the slide, you can see my first column, and it was also about crisis contagion, that article that I published in Business Horizons. And in this time, that was directly from my voice. I have an enormous amount of autonomy over what I write, and they don't edit what I write. So that's a huge advantage in having your own column. Now, if you can switch to the next slide, I have a resource for you. I published an article this year about my experience writing a column in Public Relations Review. And really the idea behind the column is to give, the article was to give people a sense of what it takes to write a column and how to approach the media and convince them to hire you as a columnist. And I know some of you are probably saying to yourselves, well, I work in the area of crisis management, that's something of great interest to the public and newspapers. Well, a colleague of mine from Yeshiva University in New York, Professor Tamara Vnet, is an expert in consumer psychology, and she has a column in Psychology Today. And she draws on her research and the research of others to talk about issues relating to consumer psychology. So really this strategy can be effective in areas outside of crisis management as well. So if any of you are interested in the article, feel free to contact me. And now I'll pass it over to Nick, and he'll talk about a publisher's perspective.
Oh, thanks so much, Dan, and greetings to everyone from all around the world. It's just been thrilling to see these notes coming in from people absolutely everywhere. I'm Nick Phillipson. I'm the editorial director for journals at Springer Nature in business, economics, general social sciences, and statistics. And I've been at Springer for 15 years. And for almost all of that time, I've had the great pleasure and privilege of being the publishing editor for the AMS journals, JAMS, and AMS Review, for which Vicki was one of the founding editors. And it's just so much fun to be a part of the community. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the conversation today. So basically, now that you've heard from the other panelists about general strategies to position and brand your research, to develop a network, connect with the market, and engage with the media, I'll focus more on some of the specific approaches that you can use to enhance your visibility once you're focused specifically on the publication process. And basically, the tips that I'll share here today are nothing revolutionary. It's really just common sense. But a lot of these details can get overlooked when you're really focusing on the substance and the content of the research. So don't overlook these. They can be enormously helpful. So the first slide is really kind of pre-publication. And I would say the main themes here are to emphasize clarity of message and searchability. So number one on these tips is basically just make sure you get an ORCID ID. It just makes absolutely sure that every piece of publication, I think it also includes your reviews and other research activities, are attributed to you and you only, especially if your name is something like John Smith or Mary Jones. There may be a lot of you out there. So this makes sure that you absolutely get credit and are identified with the pieces that you actually publish. Some of the very simple tips here are thinking about the way you position your publications. So the title, this is something I've really picked up from all my years in working in books as well, is the title should really convey the unique perspective and contribution of the article that you're writing in a few words. And it's important to be very concise. A journal article title is very much like a book title or a chapter title. You want to make sure that you send a very clear message about what you're writing and what the promise is, what the reader is going to get from this. You don't want to go on and on about the methodology. It's really what's the payoff. And some simple tips, just think about using very active words like analyzing or establishing or applying, something like that. It sort of presents a sense of action, that you're going to be presenting something that people are going to learn from and take lessons from. So it's always about being aware of your core audience. Some of the other panelists also mentioned this. You're connecting your research with people out there whom you hope will also share your passion and interest in your research. So you want to connect with them. Similarly, the abstract is a very, very important place where you have a very short presentation of the key themes of the work. What does it do? What does it present? What does it offer? What's the payoff? What are you going to learn from it? An extremely important part about the abstract is the keywords. Make sure that you're using very specific keywords that reflect the content And again, think about the outside world. How do people find your research? Most of the time, it's through Google searches. We see for most of our journals, well over 50% of the traffic comes directly from Google or Google Scholar. So think about the person out there. They're looking for something on X topic, consumer behavior, marketing, messaging, promotion, whatever it is, branding. You want to make sure you're using keywords that are going to be the same keywords that they're using when they're looking for research and interesting material, so they come to your material. Another feature that we're starting to think about using more frequently, and it's a good exercise even if you don't actually publish it, is what we call the plain English summary. It's a kind of a version of the abstract for the non-specialist. How would you pitch this? It's kind of what Dan was talking about. How would you pitch your ideas to somebody who knows nothing about what you're writing? But you want to share that passion. You want to share that there's something really relevant and interesting here. How would you present that in a way that really resonates with a very broad and general audience? We can go to the next slide, please. So the next slide is, now you've gotten your article accepted or your book accepted for publication. What are some of the things you can do on the other side? These are going to be fairly familiar refrains. I think you're going to hear a lot of the same things. That the other panelists have mentioned. Of course, social media. This is just an incredible set of tools that we have now that we didn't have even a few years ago. So really, really do think about the many, many ways that you can use all of these different platforms, not just Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, if you're in China, Weibo, Reddit, blogs. All of these are ways to present your ideas, to share your passion for what you've been writing about. One of the key themes also is to make sure that if you are using social media, that you do this actually quite frequently. It's not so much about, pay attention to me, but it's the way the algorithms work in the outside world. The more traction you get, the more likely people are going to come to your content when they're doing searches. Think about enhancements to your publications, not just the text and the content itself, but you can augment your manuscript with data, resource links, teaching notes, videos, other kinds of things that are actually very easy to produce these days and can be added and create some kind of pizzazz to what you've been writing. Always think about open access. This is now becoming much more mainstream in the humanities and social sciences. It really kind of started in the hard sciences and in medical publications, but it's now becoming much more mainstream, and there's much more opportunity for access to open access funding. So do think about open access, because that essentially is a model through which your publications are made freely available without boundaries to anyone. And what's really important here is it's a great way to make sure that your research can reach beyond the academic world to policymakers and people in industry, for example. At Springer, we have a particular resource called Shared It. Other publishers might have some similar elements like this. It's essentially the ability to share a read-only link. It's something you can put into a tweet, you can put it in your signature, a great way to just celebrate your publications and encourage people to go and take a look at them, even if they're outside the paywall. And as Dan said, engaging with your institution's communications department might not always get you everywhere, but it's not a bad idea. It's a good idea to have that as part of your bag of tricks. And some universities will really go to bat for their faculty and students, really looking for opportunities to get the word out. So these are some of the ideas. I think on the other side of publication, it's very much about having this kind of drumbeat where you have continual opportunities to share your passion for what you have published. I think this is a very similar refrain to what we've heard from the other panelists. And also always think about searchability from a publisher's perspective. That's what I would say. That's the key to getting people to your content. So I think that's it for me. I'll send it back to Hanju, and hope there's some interesting questions and conversation.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing your great experiences and insight. Now we'll open it up to all the questions that our audiences have shared with us. So we first have a very specific question to Nick from Prepublication, asking, how do you choose keyword for articles based on what others research for on Google Scholar? You typically choose keyword related to a given article, not based on what searches may be made.
Well, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of strategies. I think one way to do this is to look at other articles that are related that you've read, or articles that you've cited in your research, and see what keywords they have used. So that's one strategy. Another is also to kind of riff off of your title. You know, if you really get a really good title for your article, that is going to convey the key messages. Some of those words could also be essentially repeated as keywords. And as I say, always sort of think from the outside in. This is what I always told book authors when I was working with them. Think about that person at the other end. They've just sat down, they're starting their research project. What are the words that they're going to be typing in that are going to get to your work? So I think there's not a huge science to it. I'd be very curious and interested from the other panelists, because you've been on the other side and sort of done this in real life. You know, any further tips that you have in terms of the way that you've positioned your work through keywords?
May I add to that? As an editor of the journal, co-editor of the Journal of Product and Brand Management, and associate editor of the Journal of Business Research, I advise the authors to go and check academic databases and Scopus. Type in the words they are thinking of using and see how many people have used this word. Chances are that people that work on an area work in a small community. So you need to know who they are and what words they are using. And then you are looking at associations. So that's a tip that might help, my dear friend. And I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my assistant, so I cannot read your name and repeat it. It's very difficult for me. The only name that I almost pronounce well, not always, is my own. So
well, thank you so much. We have another question from Yash. Yash finds multidisciplinary research to be more visible than single disciplinary research. Do you believe that to be true? I'm asking this to all the panelists.
To whom you want to be known.
Okay.
So the important thing, my friend, is to think of your audience. You need to think who is important for you to be known to as a researcher. Being known in one person from one discipline, from its discipline, might be less beneficial from you, but than being known to many people from one discipline. So it very much depends on what your career is, where you are working, because in different universities, in different places, they ask different things, what you want to achieve. Think like a marketer. You're developing a marketing communication campaign, trying to attract your audience for all your own academic research. You design your product, your research, and you are communicating it to the appropriate audiences. So there is no right or wrong decision. What might work for me might not work for Vicky or might not work for Dan. I cannot do what Dan does. I'm not good with the media. I get frustrated with practitioners sometimes because they want things to happen in 3 seconds and they want things to happen in at least 3 hours. So it depends on what you want to achieve and why.
I agree with Cleopatra, and this issue of multidisciplinary, in my case, crisis management is multidisciplinary, and I wanted to brand myself as an expert in crisis management. And so what that means is that I publish in different areas. A lot of people associate crisis management with public relations, but in reality, it relates to management, it relates to marketing, it relates to communications, it relates to a lot of things. And so I publish in different areas because I want to be known as an expert in crisis management in those different areas. So I've published in Public Relations Review, but I've also published in JAMS. And so it's important to have that range if you want to brand yourself as someone that does research in that area.
Well, I'll throw in my 2 cents on this, probably of the 3 academics on the panel. I'm probably the most eclectic. I have never followed the strategy of only positioning myself in one particular marketing area. And my whole background is multidisciplinary. So my early work was, in operations management journals. I've been in business strategy journals. I've been in marketing. I guess, again, the best word to describe me is eclectic, but I will tell you that that's a difficult road to travel on. But when you do travel that road, coming out on the other side, like I have, I can pretty much talk about anything. I've published with accountants. So I think it depends on, how far you want to go to position yourself in a variety of ways. So I think in this, you have 3 panelists here. If you take Nick out of it, who's on the publishing side, who's positioned himself in publishing, Dan, who's positioned himself in crisis, Cleopatra, who's focused more in one particular, 1 or 2 particular areas. And then if you look at my history, it's a trajectory that goes over many different topics. And at any particular point in time, you could probably look at how I've segued into different topics. So I like to think about one's career as the fact that it will change over time. And you want to set yourself up to be able to change with, I guess, those life changes, age, if you will, changes that will occur. And I think for me, that's worked for me.
Victoria, is it change or evolve? Because I would have used the word evolve. I would have said that there are stages and slowly you are adding to your portfolio. And this is wisdom that for young academics is very difficult to get in 2 or 3 years. So it's evolving, growing as a researcher. And I can bet that you capitalized on things you knew from the previous area, either methodologically or theoretically or something else, to move to the next area. And they were sometimes very neighboring. Or am I incorrect?
Can I just jump in as well from the publishing perspective? I personally get really excited when I hear about people who are really kind of going beyond traditional frontiers and engaging in multidisciplinary research. And I think it's something that we take very, very seriously at Springer Nature, because we see this as a way to make a connection between research and what we call the sort of the grand societal challenges. Ultimately, research will have its greatest impact when it does, whether it's direct or indirectly, affect policymaking, the way industries interact, the way we act as citizens. And I think sparks really fly when people start to experiment, especially when people from different disciplines come together and experiment and use their collective vocabulary to wrestle with really complex issues. So I think we're going to see more and more of this, and it's really exciting to hear all of you embracing this and from different perspectives. And it seems like it's not something that needs to be forced in any way. It's going to be organic, but what I'm hearing a lot is kind of go with your gut. And that's exciting to hear from a publishing perspective, because I think it makes for very exciting publications.
Well, thank you so much for adding. I think it all comes down to basically researcher branding, how you want to be known and in which area you want to shine. I have really interesting question about culture. So Sarah's asking, like, according to understanding, culture has a lot to do with self-promoting research work, such as like which particular network to use and how frequently one can do the research promotion. What are your take on that?
I guess I can start. I mean, as someone, I guess, who was born in the US, lived in Israel for 10 years, then has lived in New Zealand for 10 years, I've actually experienced lots of different cultures. And of course, it's very important to know your audience. In Asia, it's frowned upon, and this is a generalization, but if you compare with the US, self-promotion is frowned upon. In the US, more individualistic society, people tend to do that more. And so, you know, when you do engage in promotion, you have to know where you are. You have to understand your culture. And so you have to adapt to the culture that you're in. And I've learned that from living in 3 different countries. You act very differently in those different countries in terms of how you communicate. And so, yeah, that's something very important to keep in mind. The culture matters and is very important.
What is the focus here? Is it you or is it your research? So if it is your research, it's not self-promotion. You are communicating research findings. So the way you are positioning your language, the way you are encoding your message can play a role, I think. And that's a personal opinion. But we need to remember, this is our research work. It's not us.
I'll just add to that. And you know, from my perspective, I think we are intertwining our personal brand with our research. And that for me, it's very difficult to separate those 2 out. Am I just promoting work about women entrepreneurs or direct selling, or do I want Vicki Crittenden attached to that? So when other people are thinking about doing research on women entrepreneurs, they think of Vicki Crittenden. So I think it's a balance that you have to make, so that it's not just promoting you as a person, but as a researcher, it's promoting the topic. And when someone's thinking about the topic, if they're thinking crisis management, Dan comes to mind. And so it has to be that intertwining of your personal brand and your research.
Thank you. We have one question in the chat. It's from Dusan asking, what is the best way to communicate findings of your research to the industry? Where to start as a junior researcher?
I think one idea is to sort of riff off what Dan presented. Think about outlets that are industry focused. They don't necessarily have to be the Wall Street Journal. It could be a niche publication for a particular industry. But I was really excited to hear that Dan just went for it. I'm an expert on this. I hope you're going to be interested. So look for some of those publications, and they might be newsletters, they might be online, they might be a newspaper, but look for those in the industries that you're really focused on. And I think Dan would say, go for it. Look for who the editor is or the reporter who's really been covering that particular area. Contact them. They're always looking to expand their networks. And I think they get interested when they hear somebody say, hey, I'm working on this. I'd love to be a part of your publication. So that's just one idea. But I was very much excited by Dan's presentation. And I think that's something that you shouldn't be afraid of. You don't need to limit yourself to the very specific academic world in which you are naturally operating.
I would like to suggest, especially to well, I guess to all scholars, is that when you're working on your traditional scholarship, you should always be thinking about those practical implications. And if there are some more practitioner-oriented journals to which you can take the story into the practitioner outlet. I think I've done that a lot over the years. So for example, I had an article in JAMS that took the idea behind that, and then even with some different authors, took the idea and took our combined knowledge, and we had, I think it was a Business Horizons. I've had where some more traditional scholarly research, and then I wanted to get it into kind of the B2B world, the practitioner, and there's another little journal that's called Industrial Management. You can't use citations. It's that brain dump. It's taking that knowledge that you've accumulated and you're directing it toward practitioners. So I think it's not doing your scholarly research just to get the big hit. It's also adding to that knowledge base that you have and what's that practitioner's story. And so I think you can look at it from that perspective as well. And I think it goes back, it's what Nick was saying, and it was what Dan said. He had positioned himself in crisis management. You can also take your research and think about the practitioner's story.
I want to follow up on what Vicki says. I agree with her 100%. And in fact, I'm an associate editor at Business Horizons now. And at the beginning of my career, after publishing a number of articles in academic journals, I wanted to publish an article about the managerial implications of the research, and it related to how consumers assess blame during a crisis. And I published an article in Business Horizons, and that's one of my most cited articles. And I think it's an excellent outlet, and it's something that definitely people should consider. And when I look at it in terms of my career, I think it's important. I think it's important to think about academic outlets, Journal of Business Research, JAMS, but at the same time, think of others that are more managerial. And so you have a portfolio of articles that is in your area that you brand yourself in. And that's what I've done in my 20 years. And I'm happy. It's worked out for me, I guess.
That's great. I have a general question to ask all the panelists. So in your opinion, other than increasing citation as a measure of research visibility, what do you think could be a benefit of promoting our research work?
I'll start if it's okay. I think promoting research enhances a lot of different things besides citations, influencing policy. So, I mean, through media coverage, a lot of things happen, a lot of doors open, and you really don't know what's going to happen, which makes it really exciting. You get invitations to speak to practitioner audiences. You get to be on panels, industry panels. So yeah, there's a lot of things that go beside, beyond citations that are important. There are a lot of different audiences out there that can use your research, the academic community, the government, business. And the problem is, if they don't know about it, then you really are losing out. And so my perspective on it is, the more people know about what you're doing, the more benefit that can come from it. So yeah, so citations are very important, don't get me wrong. But you also have to think beyond citations in terms of impact.
Personally, I do not think that you will get citations if you communicate, you publicize your work. Because A, some of your work might not even be published, so not published things do not get citation. And secondly, if your work is not rigorous, it's not of the appropriate quality, people will not cite you. So I don't think that your citation count will increase dramatically if you communicate your work, but you will position yourself as a researcher. I might be wrong, but that's my own perception.
I think that citation count is something that a lot of it is just us talking to ourselves, that we as academics care about citation counts, but I'm not sold on the idea that a non-academic cares as much about citation counts, so I think that we, just as Dan and Cleopatra were saying, I mean, there's so much impact that we can have in a broader community. And so a paper that might not even have high citation count for us as academics actually can have huge impact in other aspects of society, I guess. I think we have to keep in mind that the Edelman Trust Barometer places a high emphasis upon academics from a trust perspective, and that's not looking at citation count alone. It's looking at quality of the work. It's looking at the rigor of the work, and with that, we do have a huge impact on the world, whether it's in, as Dan said, with policymaking, whether it's in court cases. I mean, if you've been an expert witness, they're not looking at your citation count. They're looking at what you have to communicate based on your understanding of the research. And that goes back to the trust that society places in us as scholars. And so I don't think citation count is a sole metric.
Thank you. I have one technical question, once again from Sarah, asking if there is any type of software to manage how visible one person is, to determine which platform to use and how to better increase visibility.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure the question, is it the platform, let's say like a social media platform, or is it a?
I think it could be a website to track.
But you can increase in conferences. So are you going to count the amount of wine I consume in conferences to see how many people, to see how successful I was in increasing my visibility? So do not put yourself in a cage thinking about social media and that's all, or internet, that's all. Going out and talking about your work with enthusiasm and be passionate about it is very important. It's not enough to go and post things. You need to go there and defend it and be yourself excited with what you are doing and be yourself willing to hear to criticism and not go and defend yourself when there are mistakes. Go and say, wow, thank you so much. I learned so much from this comment. I will not do it again. In any level, people come to me, I'm a professor, and they come to me and they say, this analysis could have done differently. And I'm excited because I get excitement. They say, thank you. Can we work together? Can you help me do that? And this is increase of visibility and developing as well some sort of signature of learning from each other. It's not the people that have made it that come and tell you this is what you should do. We are a community and we are communicating what we have found. And going to a question about industry, I'm sorry, last time I checked, I was working in brand management and in marketing. And both of them need to be managerial relevant. So if any of the work I do is not managerial relevant, it means that something is wrong with the way I'm doing my research, or at least that's how I perceive it. So I'm not working for citations. I'm working for understanding of phenomena that are relevant, not for academia, but for companies or for consumers. That's my perspective. Other people are more theory-driven. Personally, I'm not. But I come from a humble background and I learned that I need to solve problems when I do things.
I think that, yeah, there are definitely things that metrics can't measure, right? So I think we have those rich conversation time is up now. It's at 4 p.m. mark right now here in Eastern time zone. So I will call it a day here. If there are any questions that we're unable to address, we'll personally answer those by email to each of those audiences. So I thank you all for joining us today. We hope our discussion was helpful to many of you, and we look forward to seeing you in our future conference in 2022 in Monterey, California in May. And the deadline is about in 10 days. So yeah, please submit your best work and I will have in-person and live communication with you all. So thank you so much once again. Thank you to the panelists.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.